Dave Birkett here, along with Carlos Monarrez. The day after D-Day, maybe, Carlos? I don't know. The
D-Day, it's D-Day
decision
plus one.
day. Decision day.
D-Day
that is
plus one is how we say it in the military,
right.
Dave.
The Lions obviously made the decision yesterday to bring Matt Patricia, Bob Quinn back for the 2020 season. Certainly, we'll get into our game predictions here before long. But let's talk about that first.
We're
Carlos.
doing predictions today.
We're going to do them today because
okay.
You're not going to be here Friday, right?
Today's Wednesday.
I know, but you're not here Friday, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So we usually
do Thursday.
We do a Wednesday video, Friday video, podcast, whatever, everything now.
Let's do another one tomorrow. Come on, let's do a prediction tomorrow.
I thought we were going to do our Christmas one tomorrow. We have some things to figure out. Let's do our prediction one today.
I can't
if
believe
we need
you haven't
to do
planned this, Dave.
I know. I'm very much the pre-planner. You know that. But let's get back into the topic at hand because our arguments are done. I mean, we've spent the past month and a half, I guess, arguing about the proper course of business for the Lions and what they should do with Matt Patricia and, who's to blame, who shares in the blame for everything that's gone on this season. Is that a cigarette on the floor right there, by the way? Forget that. We're just in this room over here. No. Oh, for those of you who are listening on the podcast version of this, we're in this soundproof room here at Lions headquarters, and I guess it's just a piece of the foam that's on the wall, whatever this is. But regardless, it looked like a cigarette. All right. Excuse my got off topic there.
This is
Matt Patricia.
Are 20 minutes
I know,
long.
right? Matt Patricia, Bob Quinn back. Go. What do you think?
It was the right decision, as I said all along. I think you need to give him. You need to give him more time. There were positive things, as I said the whole time. You looked at it was 2 seasons. It was the Matthew Stafford season and then the non-Matthew Stafford season.
Neither one were very good.
But there were signs, and I think beyond the unthinking monkeys who just look at the score and that's it. The people who actually watch the games, Dave, as you know, instead of tweeting all the time, you should be focused on.
I'm interacting with the people.
Happening. I know you're the man of the people. But look at the totality. Look at the locker room. Look at the draft picks. Look at the pro personnel that they've added. Look at how the team was, trending. If they hadn't gotten jobbed in Green Bay, with the Trey Flowers.
Job. That sounds like an editorial comment. Yeah.
Yeah.
No?
No, I wrote it. They got unfairly penalized in those situations. So
they did a great job getting off the field beyond those penalties, huh?
Well, it wasn't all sterling, of course, but I think what you see is that there were signs that they were improving. And, let's be real, right? They still had Patricia and Quinn had 3 years on their contract. That'd be a lot of money for them to eat. And what if you hire another coach and he's absolutely horrible and he goes 1-15, and then you got to fire them after 2? Then you're paying 2 coaches at the same time, it's too much.
You always look at the negative. I mean, for a while there, you got back to the positive side of things, and you were always silver lining. No, there's silver lining song, Cloud Nine colors. You were looking at the positive side of things. But what if this happens? What if you hire a winner, a Super Bowl winner? What if you think positive, man?
Right.
Things can be better than what they are. That's I don't know, man. Matthew Stafford, he's found some success under Darrell Bevell. We don't want to change it up. Well, guess what? Maybe you change it up and it gets better. Same thing with the coaching.
Can I ask you really quick? Go. Do you mind? Can I steal that idea and put it in a bumper sticker? Things can always be better. That should be the Lions bumper sticker since 1957. So can I incorporate that? Can I take that as a TM?
What was Lamar Jackson, the shirt that he wore? No one cares, work harder, right? Something like that. No one cares about the injuries. No one cares about sort of the referees' calls. No one cares about that. Work harder, get it right, get it done. That's the bottom line. That's my quarterback.
Well,
that's my quarterback.
I think that I need to point you at a toward a very. It was a pretty good story on Sunday in the Free Press about Dick Vermeil finding success. Coaches who found success after not great starting tenures. So I think that. I mean, the reality of the contracts, the looking at the nuance of where this team is. How Matthew Stafford played well under Darrell Bevell. It wasn't what you wanted. And I think the Fords, they were right, by the way, to do this, to get ahead of it, to sit down with, select media members and have a, long conversation about things and say they weren't happy with the result. And by the way, I really respect Sheila Ford Hamp for saying, we understand, we know this is not a popular decision. They acknowledge that. She acknowledged that. But we believe in something else. We believe that this is the way forward. So you're sticking to your convictions. for whatever reasons they have their convictions, but they are acknowledging and respecting that the fans believe something else. So I think that's okay. I think that and getting ahead of it, was the right thing.
So I wanted to, let you, I don't know, have your moment since you were saying they were going to come back and they should have and everything. But
I was right.
Really,
I've been right about everything.
Really,
Just say it.
I don't know about that. But really, I wanted to talk about that meeting in the future more than anything here, right? And you're right. Look, I think their reasons were genuine. I mean, certainly money plays into it, and there's all kinds of factors, right, that you take into account. The fan angst, the fan hatred of this move. That's something that they certainly considered as to whether they should get rid of this regime for those reasons. Because this is an incredibly unpopular move. I mean, I was listening to my friends at 97.1 today on the drive down, and I don't think there was a caller that called in that was in support of it. I mean, there's a lot of negativity about this move.
There was
a
no
lot
caller, or
of
Mike Sullivan didn't punch the guy who was in support of it. No, you're gone. You're gone.
No, this was before. This was
anger, top row, Valeni, right there.
This was Stony early in the morning.
Stony,
Actually,
okay.
when I took my daughter to school, and then Doug in Gator on the way in. No Gator today, but Doug on the way in. So I didn't hear who Sully put on the air. But regardless, I think you're right. This is an incredibly unpopular move. They recognize that. And so it does take some gumption, I guess, to make that when you know that it's going to be the unpopular move. But the thing that I came away with most from that sit down yesterday was, and I think we talked about this a little bit before. I've mentioned it elsewhere that this move was like. This was the Ford family flexing a little bit, and Sheila in her position. I mean, I said it on the radio, like that, it was kind of a boss move. Like she, I came away, and for those out there who don't know, I mean, the Ford family rarely speaks publicly. This was the first time.
Just recap, who was speaking at the
This
meeting?
was Rod Wood, Martha Ford, Sheila Ford Hamp, and there were 5 writers there. And this was, primarily a background meeting, so there's not a lot, that we can share from it, but just sort of a state of the team, deal. And it was a good 30 minutes, 35 minutes. And again, for those who don't know, Martha Ford had done one impromptu press conference where she took questions. That was the first training camp she took over as owner, and she spoke for 1 minute and 24 seconds, if I remember right.
Is it that long?
Yeah, right. We've had, there's been cordial conversations. You see them and say hi at the owners' meetings, but and Martha obviously talked when she fired, Bob Quinn. I'm sorry, not Bob Quinn, Martin Mayhew and Tom Milan. Yep, didn't take any questions, but made a statement there. So there have been some other small ones, but I thought yesterday's sit down was. I think it was important for them to get out there and for us to hear them a little bit so we can share their message with the fans. But it also told me a little something that, look, when you are a head coach, a GM, when you come to the Lions, you think that you have, you're walking into a situation where there is, the expectation is that ownership is very hands-off. They give you a lot of time. There's lots of patience. And yesterday, I mean, they flipped the script. Like, they were out there and they said, these are our expectations. You need to meet them next year. They put a timeline on it. And I know what the quote was and what the letter to the fans said, playoff contender. But believe me, the tone, the feeling that I got was that it's playoffs or bust, that there has to be some significant step forward next year. And this was them going out publicly after they talked to their coach and GM, something they never do, and sitting down and saying, look, we are very disappointed in the season, and this is not at all where we expected to be. And yes, we're bringing them back, and yes, we see some redeeming qualities in what this regime has built. But mind you, if this doesn't change and change quick and change dramatically, there will be big changes to come. And so I thought for them to make that step publicly, that just told me a lot about, I don't know, not just the expectations and where they want this thing to head and where they think this thing is heading, but it was them flexing their muscle as owners a little bit too, and saying that we are not going to stand for this anymore. You got one final chance, and only because of that Matthew Stafford injury and some of the things we saw early on, but you need to get this thing fixed and fixed right.
Yeah, and that's is it going to be is 8-8? Or 9-7, squeaking into the playoffs and getting demolished, going to be good enough? And I think that's where you're teasing me about this, but you have to look at the totality of where the organization is headed. Matt Patricia's been banging that drum about process. I'm sure Bob Quinn will do the same thing, right? We don't ever want to call this a rebuild when it in fact has been pretty much a rebuild, but we've kind of taken it down to the studs, bringing it back up, trying to like do some, change a lot of stuff, the culture in the building, the people who are here, the evaluation process, the kind of players that they have, the way that they interact with them, the way everything, right? They wanted to change so much that wasn't going to be a quick fix. Everybody always wants it to be a quick fix. They want to hire, what's his name, the Chicago coach and draft a quarterback and get to the playoffs within a year or two and Matt Nagy and win a division title. Everybody wants that. Everybody wants the quick thing, and that's what the NFL sells mostly is that hope that hey, teams do it all the time. Why can't we do it, right?
And they do.
The Lions and the Browns are exceptions that they don't for some reason, but so that vision, and presumably they believed in that vision and early on because they hired these guys, right? They hired Bob Quinn, they hired Matt Patricia. They believe in that vision. If they still believe in the vision, if they still believe in what the Lions are saying to them, the coaches and Bob Quinn, and they're seeing some progress, and you can believe in like let's see next year a little healthier. They massage the roster a little bit more. Stafford doesn't get hurt. The problem is going to be the gray areas, right? And this is what's going to make 2020 fascinating for the Lions. I think is the directive to have to win from ownership, directly from ownership saying this. And how do you do that exactly with one key figure, I think, is Matthew Stafford, is that he now has 2 straight years, different back injuries. He has proved he's going to turn 32. He's proved in his career to be really good, a quick healer and play through injuries, tough guy, all this stuff. But Father Time is undefeated. Yep. He just you can see him getting hurt again. And this is the topic that a lot of the writers are talking about right now is, do you draft for a quarterback or do you bring in another quarterback, a Ryan Fitzpatrick type guy? But what happens if Stafford does get hurt, that quarterback catches fire? Is there a quarterback controversy? We know the Fords really respect Matthew Stafford, and I think they really want to win with Matthew Stafford. So there's potentially a little bit of a political issue here. Do you have carte blanche to go sign Colin Kaepernick, the best free agent quarterback out there, or no? You have to sign or draft the right kind of quarterback who's not necessarily going to threaten Matthew Stafford. So there's a whole dynamic in play with Stafford going forward.
I think that's one of the risks, I guess, of doing this is that, look, there may be, and I asked Matt Patricia this on his conference call yesterday. At some point, right? Part of this, the team building, the franchise building thing is you have to also take into account the future interests of your team, right?
Right.
And look, it may be a case where, the best player for the Lions to draft would be a Tua Tagovailoa, or there may be that. At what point do you take a quarterback? Do you take that young back up in the draft because you still need to build for the future? But do you take it in the second round when that second rounder can really help you on the field? Do you take it in the first round when you're going to have to take a year for that guy to develop rather than getting an impact player right away? And obviously in a situation where, that Matt and Bob are in now where you need to win right now, we know what they're going to do, right? You're not drafting a quarterback in round 1 now. You're taking that defensive player that's going to help you right away. So, I think there's certainly some risk there, and you mentioned the Stafford, injury history of late. That's something that, if it pops up again, then I think ultimately it's going to be the next regime's decision on how to proceed forward with that. I don't think that this regime would be able to use a Matthew Stafford injury as an excuse for a second straight season, and that's, to your point, why they need to go out and get some sort of reliable backup this offseason. So you're going to see them. I think, my sense here is, yes, the Fords, they like, some of the direction that this team was headed before the injuries, and yes, they buy into injuries as an excuse for where they are now, and they also think that with some small changes or some major changes to the coaching staff, some roster additions, that this thing can take a big leap forward next year. But, you don't have unlimited free agent dollars, and you're going to have to spend some of that on getting a reliable backup quarterback just because of what's gone on with Matthew Stafford the last 2 years. So there are still some very big decisions, some very important decisions, for this franchise to make and for Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia to make in the offseason.
Let me ask you, if you're Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, you're two people in one, so it's kind of interesting.
I'd have a lot of money.
You would have a lot of money. If you're those guys and you're working for your job, you have to save your job this year. You have to do. What is the number one thing that you would focus on?
Off-season you're talking about?
Off-season, whether it's player addition, coaching changes, whatever it might be. What's the number one thing that you would focus on if your job is already like in peril?
Well, look, I mean, the first thing they're going to end up dealing with is the coaching changes. They're going to
not first thing.
No, I know.
Thing.
I'm just saying that the defensive staff, that's going to come up first. But I don't think that's most important because this is Matt Patricia's defense, and it's not like you're going to go out and get somebody who's going to totally overhaul the defense because then you have to overhaul personnel again. Right. So this is Matt Patricia's defense, no matter who the coordinator is. The most important thing that they do is who they take with that top 5 draft pick, because that person needs to be an impact player right away. He needs to be a foundational player for the long-term success of this team. Now, right away as a rookie, maybe he's not going to have, as big of an impact, but I think that player can. We see what Nick Bosa does with the San Francisco 49ers. We saw Denzel Ward last year with the Cleveland Browns. I think if you have the right defensive player, they can step in and make a significant impact as a rookie. Now, apart from that, obviously you have some big free agent decisions pending. You're going to have to spend some of your money on Kenny Golladay, re-up him. You have a trade potentially with Darius Slay.
You're going off the rails.
No, but these are all decisions.
But the number
one is that draft pick, because if you are Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, again, your objective is to be here long term and to build this thing long term, right? It's not just to win in 2020. You have to win in 2020.
You have to win in 2020 to be here and beyond.
Right. But again, the most important thing is that top 5 draft pick, because that's somebody that in theory is going to help you win for 10 years, not just for one.
All right. So for Josh,
tell me why I'm right.
Yeah. So for Coach Josh McDaniels in the future, Chase Daniel will be awesome for him. So to me,
Chase Young,
yeah,
play like Young for Young.
Chase Young. There's too many Chases running around. No. So the correct answer is the quarterback, the backup quarterback, because there's no other position, and we've seen it for the first time this year with Matthew Stafford. Hey, credit to Jeff Driscoll. Even David Blau has played pretty well, in relief, but you cannot have they're not going to get the excuse of Stafford a second straight year. They have to be prepared, and I think that's going to be a whole negotiation between Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, and ownership of, listen, this is who we need to address. Either a veteran, solid dude, we got to spend some money here, or make a trade or whatever it is, and get somebody out there who fits our system, who can not miss a beat, come in, be his own guy, run the the offense, because you could have won some of those games. They were so close in some of those games when Jeff Driscoll came in. This is where you need to win games and save your job. You can't worry about the future. And I'm not saying you have to. I don't think drafting a quarterback in the first round, whoever it is, I don't think that's the answer. But either maybe a little further down in the draft, second, third round, whatever it is. And whenever people think about draft picks, by the way, it's always they're like these precious diamond-encrusted draft picks. And how angry are people that T.J. Hawkinson and Jelani Tavai, the number 1 and number 2 picks this year? How would you rather had a better quarterback? I don't know, whoever, than either of those guys. Yes, and they could have potentially helped, win a few games, kept them in the playoff hunt, and playing meaningful games in December, not being eliminated embarrassingly by Thanksgiving, by going in December, giving yourself a chance, right? That's the quarterback. There's just no other position like it in football or any other sport where it's so important. And you can't just hope that Stafford is completely fine next year.
Hope is not a strategy.
I've heard that before.
That should be the name of our podcast. Hope is not a strategy. I think, I understand what you're saying, and certainly, the quarterback position is the most important in the NFL by far. But I don't think the backup quarterback is the most important, or even the most important thing for this team, because look, the reason why they haven't signed a good backup in the past hasn't been about the lack of available backups. It's been about money. They just haven't wanted to spend that money. They know they need to spend that money now, which means they can go out and get a Case Keenum or a Nick Foles if he becomes available, or whoever. They can get that guy. That guy is out there to be had. Mm-hmm. So I don't, whereas when you're picking in the top of the draft, certainly the insurance is important for Matthew Stafford given his health, but A, we don't know what sort of impact he'll have. B, I think you have a lot of mediocre options that are all the same, but better than Jeff Driscoll, David Blau, Josh Johnson, David Fales. I mean, the 10 people that you've had in here.
You list all of them? Tom Savage?
I mean,
throw him under the bus too.
Tom Savage, Chad Kanoff. I mean, everyone that they've had in here, right? So I think there's enough of that type of player out there that whether you don't get Case Keenum and you end up with Ryan Fitzpatrick, or whether whoever the case is, I think you can get that guy, and you can be kind of choosy without waiting for or without picking up scraps off the heap.
You need to be, the worst case scenario in this whole thing is that Stafford does get hurt. Let's say Fitzmagic comes in, lights it up, 5 touchdowns in his first 2-3 games, and Stafford wasn't maybe playing great to begin with, comes back, he's struggling, and then what do? People are going to be screaming for, Fitzpatrick to come back in and all that stuff. But the good thing is you have that offense with Darrell Bevel. It's doing well. There's obviously different things they got to do. They got to consider the running back position as well. All these different things. Nothing's ever complete, but that offense is functioning well. You get a good quarterback, a good established veteran in here.
Go ahead, keep going. I'm just checking.
And checking your voicemail. So that to me is important. And there's so many other things. And I agree, the defense needs help and all this other stuff. But to me, that's the number one issue. And like you said, we have never had, and a part of that is I think it's political, and that Stafford doesn't want a rival. He doesn't want somebody who's possibly going to unseat him. And every year he probably grows a little bit more insecure about his, total control over the position, as much as he's respected to it. Well, Stafford's not dumb. He's seen it across the league for more than a decade. No matter how established you are, there are footsteps. There were, when Tom Brady got hurt, the last time, and Matt Castle came in, and people were asking, even in New England, they were asking.
Ago.
I know, but even then they were asking. He'd already won 3 Super Bowls, whatever. But is he the starter? That's the number one thing. Is when your backup functions well, you're always going to get replaced, no matter who you are.
They're coming for us all eventually.
Absolutely.
There's a young kid out there that's going to take your job. I mean, hopefully tomorrow, but probably not. No, but no, I think. It depends, right? If the Lions spent a first-round pick on somebody like Stafford, anybody would be like, oh, that's the end of your career. You draft the first-round pick that high, you're done in Detroit. Maybe not in 2020, but certainly not long after that. But a Ryan Fitzpatrick or whoever the backup flavor of the month may be, Teddy Bridgewater, whoever it is, that person is not taking over for you. I think Matthew has done enough here. And he has enough respect, you mentioned, among the Ford family, among the people that really matter, that he wouldn't have anything to worry about in that regard. Even if fans were screaming for Jake Brudock and Kellen Moore and all these people in the preseason. So it's not anything that quarterbacks aren't used to. But certainly, Stafford's back. The recent injury history, I think we both agree that it's of the utmost importance for the Lions to make sure that they have some insurance next year, because again, I didn't think it was a valid excuse now. As I've said before, the roster, this is how they built it, right? So you live with it. I know the Fords championed the depth, but obviously the depth wasn't good enough when you lose 7 straight. But they can't go through this again. And Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, it's been made very public that they can't do that. Otherwise, their jobs will be gone.
I just hope that they're allowed to do it their way, and that's the whole problem, or the issue potentially with a backup quarterback, or any position really, but the quarterback is the most obvious, highlight position. But if you did have somebody who's a backup and they play well, is it the minute that Stafford's healthy, he's got to go back in there, even if he was kind of struggling, and how Stafford is, he's going to want to get in there as soon as possible, even if he's not quite ready. Players do it all the time. They're not ready to go. They're not ready to play. They're always bucking I can get in there. I can get in there. You're
right.
Not ready yet, But there's a whole thing of it. This is the human part of the NFL, is that they are just like normal people. They don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to seem like they're not earning their keep. They want to get in there. Even the star players. So that's going to be the hard part of if it happens. And hopefully it doesn't happen. You hope that everybody's healthy and everything the whole year. I'm not saying Stafford needs to be unseated. I thought he was playing really well. And that's part of the reason that they're getting a second chance, I think, or another chance. But you have to allow for that. You have to and that's the problem with the backup quarterback. I think in the Lions is that they've spent so much money on Stafford, and he's their guy, and all this other stuff. Everybody loves him in the organization. It's just like, well, why are we going to go spend more money? He's probably not. The backup's not going to play. Stafford's been healthy. He's played how many straight years, and this is the first year that there's a chink in the armor, and now he's human. Well,
look, it's a lot to have $28 million or whatever invested in a starter, and then another $12 million, $15 million invested in a backup. Like, you just, because cap dollars again, it's
right.
You don't have an unlimited amount. That's a tough thing to do, to allocate that much to one position and that much to a backup. So I understand why the Lions have been reluctant to do that in the past, but again, I don't think, given Stafford's health, they have that luxury of letting that position slide.
Well, let me ask you this: how much time did Flacco have left on his contract when they
drafted Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, do you think they traded him last year? Right,
they traded him to Denver, so he must have had 2 years left at least, right? Because, and I don't remember, so maybe the viewers out there, listeners, can forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but you draft Lamar Jackson 32nd, expecting that he's going to take over for Flacco. Flacco was the starter for most of last season until late in the year, and then I think they traded him to Denver this offseason. I don't think that was a free agent move. I could be wrong, but so then you once you groom that young guy to take over, he does. And look, I think this is what has gotten people. Why people get mad at Stafford, or why they don't understand the organization's love investment in Stafford, because Joe Flacco's a guy that wins a Super Bowl, right? He's a first-round pick. It's not like this guy came out of nowhere, right? The Ravens spent a first-round pick on him, and he wins a Super Bowl, and then but then you're like, you know what? He's done. He's not going to do this. It's not working here right now. So what do? They trade up. They get a first-round pick, spend it on Lamar Jackson, hoping that that's not a slam dunk by any means, but they see something. They go ahead and make that decision. And we've seen it in other places too. Kansas City, right? They have Alex Smith, serviceable starter.
Number one overall pick.
One more than Matthew Stafford in his career. I know he's been a number of places and isn't the arm talent that Stafford is, but he's a talented player. And what do? They trade up and draft Patrick Mahomes. So I think when Lions fans look around the league and they see situations like that, and they see situations like we talked about the other day, Pittsburgh winning with a third-string quarterback, the Carolina Panthers, staying above water for a few weeks, getting some wins with a backup, the New Orleans Saints with Teddy Bridgewater, they stay in the Saints are a much better team, right, than the Lions. But when they see a backup quarterback being able to keep that team in contention for the number one overall pick, that's when they look at what's gone on with the Lions and they say, well, why can't we do that? Why don't we have that backup quarterback? Why are we so invested in this quarterback who has never won a playoff game in his career? Why do we not have that team, the ability to withstand some of these injuries? And that's why I think, back to the point that we talked about before, why this decision to keep Matt and Bob has rubbed so many fans the wrong way, because they're not as quick to excuse these last 6 games as the Ford family has.
Yeah, and I hope that this is the thing with the NFL, and I hope that the question the Fords have to ask themselves, the question that Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia have to understand, and
that's me on both of them, remember?
And the question that the fans need answered is, do the Lions want to win? Or do the Lions want to win with Matthew Stafford? And if those are two different scenarios, because hey, if he's healthy, I think he's fine. There's no problem with him. He's going great. He was having a really good. Some people were calling him MVP candidate the first 8 games. So if he can,
that was a couple years ago. I did that.
Yeah, no, you were saying this year too that he was
MVP
he was playing
caliber football.
Caliber,
yeah,
yes,
I'm not
and I don't disagree. He was playing great. He was awesome under Darryl Bevell. It was nice to see that. The wins weren't there, but that was more defense, so whatever. But you can't be sentimental about any position in the NFL. If a kicker's not getting it done, you got to look for options. I don't care if it's Jason Hansen. You got to look at different options. And Stafford, you have to be prepared. And I think the Lamar Jackson thing is a really good comparison, because if you see somebody you like, and they're maybe in the second round, and you're hearing, other than the Patriots, Bob Quinn, don't worry about them. But if you're hearing that, someone might move up and take this quarterback, and you're thinking about getting him early in the second round, you move up to the first round, that might be worth doing. Because, let's face it, Stafford's going to be 32. He can't play forever. He's got just a few more years in his contract. you got to prepare for him leaving or not or falling off, whatever, at some point. You can't be sentimental about this. Yes, the team and the organization would love to win, be successful with Matthew Stafford, pay him back for all the hard work he's done, all the injuries he's played through, all that. Absolutely, but unfortunately, you don't have that luxury. If your mandate is to win now, you have to protect your interests. You have to be prepared for this eventuality because you saw what happened this year, and it's too important of a position. Whether it's in the draft, and I don't think where the Lions are drafting right now, I think it's too high to take either one of those guys. I don't think are amazing, Burrow or Tua. So
Burrow's going number one. No shot at it.
yeah. So I don't even
Tua, look.
I'm not sold on either one of those guys. Injuries, other things, are you?
Tua, look, man, Tua was going to be the number one overall pick in the draft. It's just injuries.
Injuries. Job Best is going to go higher too.
But so I'm saying from a talent standpoint, look, maybe this works out for the Lions if they end up picking third because maybe if Tua's healthy, if teams are signing off on that hip, maybe the Dolphins or somebody wants to move up to number 3. And so the Lions, then Bob can make that move where, you're still getting a pretty good player at 4 or 5 or wherever you trade down to, plus you get a little bit of a haul of picks, and that really helps infuse talent in this roster. So maybe it ends up working out, best for Lions. I just want to say this too. You mentioned, making these, the moves without regard to anything, just being straight killer business-like with some of those decisions. And everybody knows the Patriots do that better than anybody, right? Bill Belichick just has... he has no pulse. He can pull the trigger on anything, and it tends to work out. I'll give Bob credit for this. I think he's, done. It hasn't always worked, but I think he's done that. Where Golden Tate, right? That wasn't a popular move, but people said, he dealt Golden Tate when they were 3 and 4 or something, and they were, borderline playoff contender. Deal a good player, get rid of him, get something ahead of time, right? Quandre Diggs. Move hasn't worked out, but that was a move that was a no-pulse move. It was just you know what? We don't think he fits anymore. Let's get rid of him before it's too late. So I think
Tracy Walker?
Yeah. Well, I think they've tried to do that in a regard.
Yeah.
No, again, those are two different things.
No, I'm just saying he doesn't care that much. He wants to. He has his vision and his convictions.
Yes, he will make those moves, and I think the idea in the best teams in the NFL, like you said, they can do that before it gets too late. And they haven't worked out for the Lions so far, but that's what you need. You need to be able to have those, the stones. I don't know. Can I say that? The gumption, right? To be able to do that. And so I think, that's what impressed me, I guess, yesterday in that meeting about Sheila. And I think, that's what I like about, even though they haven't always worked, about what this regime has done in some regards too.
Yeah, under Bob Quinn. I'll give him credit. I didn't think the Tracy Walker pick made a lot of sense at the time, and
you didn't like the Frank Ragnow pick. See, back in the day, you didn't like a lot of things, Carlos.
I didn't like a lot of things. I didn't like the Ragnow thing was more offensive line. There's too many safe picks, taking an offensive lineman. It was like every year. How many did he take 1 year? 4 of them. It was like
Dahl, Glasgow.
Yeah,
right.
And it's always going to be the safe pick. We need a better. Everybody thinks they need 5 all pros to run 3 yards or whatever it is. So
let me interrupt real quick as you're collecting that thought there, just because I think the explanation here as to the Lions have made enough of those safe picks now, and I think the belief inside the walls is that they've built enough of that foundation that. And that's what maybe these past 2 years were, and maybe that's what Bob and Matt were trying to explain that we never quite grasped or heard. Maybe it was just being explained to the Fords. I don't know. That now they have enough of that foundation in place. The belief is, at least, that they have enough of that foundation in place that they can take more risks. Maybe they can go out and get a guy who's not the right personality fit, but there's enough of the right people in the locker room that they can. They can handle that a little bit more, or maybe they can take a little more risky pick in the draft on somebody. I'm just telling you, this is. I see that face. I think I don't know if I completely buy it, because then you can keep a Diggs on your team, right? You don't have to worry about what impact he might have on the locker room by speaking out against something, or a Darius Slay. So we'll see how that plays out, but I feel comfortable in saying that that's sort of how it's been explained, or that's how people inside the walls think.
Yeah, within reason. I don't think you can go out and get a Jalen Ramsey.
They're not going to get. I think you get Jalen. I don't think you can get an Antonio Brown. I don't think you can get Antonio Brown. Or I still don't think they'll
waste. No, nobody wants.
Yeah,
Antonio
I still
Brown.
don't think they would take a a risk on a guy like Tyreek Hill coming out of
Right.
because
Right.
of the background, right? Different issues, but I
Like
think
Le'Veon Bell, maybe.
I think the personality fit, because they have enough of the right people around, maybe they can, get one or two that wouldn't normally be the right fit, in that at this stage of their building process, they feel more comfortable doing that.
The only thing they have to balance a little bit is don't discount how important it was that this locker room stayed together. That through it all, through the losing, 7 straight losses, right? 8 out of 9, or what is it?
10 out of 11.
10 out of 11. I mean, a ton of losing, and that locker room has not changed. People are not. I mean, we've seen probably 7 to 9 seasons where the locker room was a lot worse. I mean, the team has stayed together because they have curated this group of players who are very like-minded in the way that they respond to Patricia. Some of them gotten used to them. They drafted their kind of guys. They tend to go to the right programs. They tend to get the right free agents. That's all part of the culture fit, and that's. People like to talk about culture when everybody's winning, but the culture also is important when you're losing. And they've stayed together, they've stayed positive. There's nobody out there throwing chairs and getting angry, at least publicly, or that we're hearing about. So that's something that's kept. I think that's part of why they've stayed close into games. And Patricia references the day how he said, that these players really care about each other, and there is this sense of decent camaraderie in the locker room. I'm not saying it's a love fest. I'm just saying that it's stayed together. You add pieces like Wes Hills and Bo Scarborough, and it all seems to kind of work in some fashion. They're not winning, but they're keeping it respectable. And that's where you're gonna, if you sprinkle in a dude who just, he's really good, but he can be disruptive, and Jalen Ramsey is going to start a war with the media, and that's another thing. Let's not forget, the media is playing a part in this. We are going to be watching these guys with microscopes, and every turn, every decision that's made, we're going to be examining it. You throw in a jerk in the locker room who's going to start fighting with the media, that's a lot of problems. That's a lot of problems.
I'll say this because I think, you're kind of right. But look, the guys you mentioned, right? Bo Scarborough, Wes Hills, I mean, all these people that we're talking about, all these people are young guys who are unproven, who don't have the capacity to speak out, who if they did, they would be bounced to the curb because they're nobodies in the NFL world right now.
Logan Thomas's, your Jesse James, those kind of guys, they're
it's the same thing. Who's going to go pick up Logan Thomas? I mean, it's not like Logan Thomas is a key player for you. It's like Jalen Ramsey is a difference maker, right? So you need to put up with a guy like that because of his talent. And I mean, that's no offense to Logan Thomas, and that's no offense to Bo Scarborough and Wes Hills and Jason Kabinda and all these guys that are populating the locker room right now. But when you're that type of player, that when you're not the A-list celebrity in the NFL world, you have less capacity to speak out because people will put up with it less. And so that's why there's nobody throwing chairs in the locker room. I mean, when we went in the locker room Monday, I remember walking in the locker room and looking around and being like, man, I need a team leader to talk about this Patricia stuff. Who am I going to talk to? Not here anymore, not here, IR, okay, not here. There was nobody that I could even think of talking to. I was like, God, I hope Tavon Wilson comes in.
Kennard was in there. Danny Amendola walked in. Some of the offensive linemen walked in.
And I'm exaggerating a little bit.
When you walked in right away, it was empty, yes.
And when I looked around and I was looking at the locker room, and I was like, this was after the game Sunday, and I was thinking to myself, who am I going to talk to about this? And I was like, I mean, I could talk to Amani, but he's a rookie. That's not quite the same voice. Will Harris, okay, same thing. He's a rookie. And again, they're important players to what's going on right now. But it's not like talking to Darius Slay or Jared Davis or all these guys that, and Slay was obviously playing, but these guys who weren't playing in that game or who are no longer part of the team, right? There's no Stafford to talk to speak on the offense. No Marvin Jones, no Kerryon Johnson, even though he's in year 2. Half the offensive line was injured. Fortunately, Graham Glasgow was in there and ended up talking to him. But on defense, it was the same thing. There's no Jared Davis. You're missing Mike Daniels got hurt. I mean, so a lot of these players that right sort of players still. These aren't guys that are going to be disruptive and flip over the apple cart. But I think that's why you're not seeing some of that too, because these guys they're just trying to fit in, right? Because if they don't, you're out the door. People aren't going to put up with that non-A-list player rocking the boat.
But would you have called Quandre Diggs an A-list player? I mean, he was a starter, but for the Lions.
Well, and they shipped him out because they didn't think he was an A-list player, right? Because he's maybe he wasn't, but they didn't want to put up with that voice, and so I think that's part of it, right? And Quandre wasn't disruptive in that regard. Just because you have some personality, or just because you're willing to say something's wrong or ask if we can do something a different way, I don't find that to be a negative. And I think
you don't.
No, I don't. I think most good leaders, like you want some feedback, and you want some. It's not good to have yes men around you all the time, right? You need some people that, and not everybody thinks this way. I mean, that's the easier way to go about things, is to have those yes men. But you want somebody to question your ways in a constructive way, so that way you can build a better product, whatever it is. I'm not just talking football here, and I think, again, not just talking football and Lions, but I think too often that's what happens, is that people surround themselves with yes men, and they don't hear what they need to hear in order to further themselves, their careers, whatever it is.
It's a tough balance, in especially in the NFL or any large organization, is you want some input, but you need it to be constructive. You don't want it to be disruptive.
Yeah.
I think like someone like Matt Prater actually fills that role for Matt Patricia. He's talked about it before, that he really depends on him and listens to him, and he's one of those. So it's those personalities, right?
A lot of Matts. It's the first name.
A lot of Matts, yeah. And it's just, who do you have a good working relationship? Some guys can say something to their boss that other guys can't, and part of it is the way that message is delivered. And maybe an older guy can say this and a younger guy can't. Who knows, right? But that's the thing. Is just, I'm saying, is the precarious idea of adding the wrong kind of person to.
I always, as we're
You
going through
fidget
this-
more than.
No,
what time is it?
I'm looking at the bottom of the microphone here for those, because
running out?
I always get worried that when I'm holding the bottom of it that I'm
Oh.
going to hit the button and shut it off or something.
John
so
Fu told you to tape that thing. You haven't done it. Sorry, John Fu.
I apologize. I probably won't do it though. So let's be honest. I was holding the bottom of it, and I was like, I should make sure this thing is on still. Go.
Yeah.
Go. finish
Anyway,
the point.
yeah, that's just it. Just that you got to win. I'm getting back to the point of you. Hopefully, they get a chance to do it their way without being too concerned about political ramifications. And if that means, hey, this free agent, Jalen Ramsey, was available, why didn't you get him? Whatever. Like, well, because he doesn't really fit. Like we've just heard too many stories behind him from other coaches and organizations that,
Plus, he's
whoever it is,
I know,
it doesn't matter who it is, but who, just you have to take that into account. And I think that's part of, you should know this better than anybody, is if that locker room was disruptive, what would the storyline be? That team is out of control, that Matt Patricia has lost the locker room or something like that.
And then
that's a nail in the coffin.
He wouldn't be the head coach, because I think one thing that the Fords appreciate is that Matt has evolved as a coach, both in the way that the locker room has bought in, and certainly some of that is the players in there, but also the way that he's carried himself publicly. So there's no doubt that has, I've said this before, right? They've seen. This was a step forward off the field. They've seen some growth in some of those areas, even if it was a big step back on the field in terms of record and everything. So I think that all plays into it too. So
Yeah, you're right. Well said. I mean, that's.
let's leave it right there. Last word. Well said to me. Go ahead.
I do think that I always appreciate when whoever it is, whatever job you're in, whatever, if you're willing to not necessarily learn from your mistakes or anything, but just take some input, take a step forward, show that you're willing to grow in some way. Doesn't mean you have to change everything about who you are or what you do, but especially when you're in a new position, and let's say, the NFL head coach job is insane. It's just inhuman. Nobody should have it. It's just too much. You're dealing with too many problems. It's a crazy, crazy, crazy job. I can't believe anybody would ever want it. But if you do, having to take all these factors into play, and even if, learning and moving forward and growing, whatever you want to call it, I think Patricia gets a lot of credit for that. And I think that's something that the Fords have seen behind closed doors that we haven't seen quite as much. We've seen it on a more, upfront one-to-one interaction with Patricia and the players. But I think if, they have a different perspective on this whole thing, right? And as we know, some of the Fords tend to watch our videos or read our articles once in a while, so they can see, okay, well, how are they reacting?